merged, and then the lights went out completely. I drove for hours, the stolen drive still humming in my pocket. When I finally stopped at a rest area, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, hollow-eyed, trembling. But for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw the reflection smile back a split second after I'd stopped. The lake still watches. It's been 6 months since the night the HOA disappeared. Whispering Pines is gone now, or at least that's what the county records say. On paper, it was a dissolved community due to environmental contamination. But when I drive past the old access road, I still see the sign half buried in weeds. Welcome to Whispering Pines Estates, where community runs deep. It's funny how the world moves on. Developers came, looked, and left. The land's been blacklisted. Locals call it the dead shore. No one fishes there anymore. No one dares swim except me. The nights are worst. That's when I hear it, the low hum vibrating through the air, like the sound of something huge stirring beneath the surface. I tell myself it's just memory, just trauma. But the dreams say otherwise. In them, I'm back in the mansion's ruins. The floorboards creak. The water seeps through the walls. And every time I look in a mirror, the reflection tilts its head in the wrong direction. I tried to share the truth. I sent the files. The recordings, everything I had to Maria, the journalist who'd helped me before. She never replied. Her editor said she quit the paper, moved off the grid. 2 weeks later, an anonymous envelope arrived at my motel. Inside was a single photo, Maria standing by the lake, smiling blankly, wearing a Whispering Pines HOA badge. I returned there again. Once. Maybe it was guilt, maybe obsession. The lake looked peaceful under the morning sun, as if nothing had ever happened. The air smelled of pine and damp soil. The old hall had burned to the ground. Only its foundation remained, cracked and filled with water. But in the mud, I saw footprints, bare deep, leading from the lake toward the trees. And alongside them, smaller ones. Human. I followed them to where my old truck had been abandoned. Someone had scratched words into the driver's side door with something sharp. "You belong here too." That night I couldn't sleep. I watched the footage again, the one from the archive room, the lab, the tanks. But at the very end, past the static, there was one more frame. I paused it. It wasn't scientist this time, it was me. Standing beside Kerrigan, clipboard in hand, wearing an HOA badge. Smiling, the timestamp, 1978, the realization hit like ice water. The records, the files, the strange reflections, they weren't just coincidences. The replicas Kerrigan warned about. Maybe I wasn't fighting them at all. Maybe I was one of them. When the experiment failed, when the facility flooded, maybe they didn't all die. Maybe some of them walked out, believing they were real, believing they were human. Believing they bought a mansion by a lake to start over. I went back one last time before writing this. The air was still, the lake flat as glass. I stood on the cracked dock, my reflection trembling in the water, and I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. Who am I? The reflection smiled. Not a mirror's smile, a different one. And then it whispered back, "Homeowners always return." The surface broke open. Hands, pale and familiar, reached up from the depths. Dozens of them, hundreds, pulling not in anger but welcome, and before the darkness took me, I saw faces beneath the water. Not monsters, not copies, just echoes, all wearing the same calm expression, all whispering the same words in perfect unison. Welcome back to the community. Epilogue. Authorities later drained part of Holloway Lake after a report of structural debris. No remains were found, only fragments of old concrete stamped with WPEA. The case was closed without conclusion. But every few weeks, fishermen say they see light under the water, a faint blue glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. The HOA's gone, they say, but the lake still watches. Eviction notice. They came at dawn. The sound of tires crunching gravel jolted me awake in my truck, still parked by the lake. 3 black SUVs stopped at the edge of the property. Men in suits, too polished to be demolition workers, stepped out and formed a neat line in front of my gate. The lead man, slick hair and mirrored sunglasses, carried a white envelope. He didn't knock. He just taped it to my truck's window and walked away. I peeled it open. Eviction notice, issued by the Whispering Pines Estates Association for violation of Section 12, unauthorized occupancy of HOA-controlled property. Effective immediately. It was signed by Thomas Kerrigan. I laughed out loud. It sounded more like a bark, bitter and hollow. They'd demolished half my house, locked me underground, and now they were evicting me from my own land. That was the moment something snapped. I spent the day in town gathering allies, or at least trying to. The sheriff's office refused to take my complaint. If it's an HOA issue, the deputy said, you'll have to take it up with the county board. The county board sent me to zoning. Zoning said the HOA's charter had private legal authority. Every door led back to Kerrigan. By evening, I sat alone in the diner, staring at the file I'd stolen. Blueprints, maintenance logs, a list of board members with clearance, and at the bottom, a financial statement showing monthly deposits from an entity called Echelon Development Group. A developer, of course. They weren't preserving the land, they were prepping it. Level the old homes, drain the lake, build new luxury condos. And anyone in the way? Cleared, including me. That night I went back armed with a camera, a crowbar, and something I hadn't felt in months nor purpose. The mansion's remains glowed silver under the moonlight. A portable floodlight hummed near the site, illuminating the machinery left behind. Excavators, generators, stacks of lumber. No guards tonight. I walked to the hatch again. This time, I didn't go down. I wanted evidence, not more ghosts. I snapped photos of the equipment tags, the logos, the unmarked crates stacked nearby. Then I saw something glinting in the dirt. A key card. White, with the Echelon logo and the name M. Dorsey. I slipped it into my pocket. That's when I heard the crunch of boots behind me. Couldn't stay away, huh? Kerrigan's voice. Calm, almost amused. I turned. He was alone, wearing that same smug half-smile. You're trespassing again, he said. You're demolishing property you don't own, I shot back. I've got photos, files, proof. The county will see, he chuckled. The county knows. Everyone knows. Whispering Pines isn't yours, and it never was. You think a few old papers make you an owner? He stepped closer, the light cutting across his face. Cold, calculated. We're cleaning up a mess older than both of us. That lake hides things better left buried. Then why are you building condos on it? I asked. He paused, just a flicker of something behind his eyes, then smiled again. Because progress demands sacrifice. He walked back toward his SUV, leaving me standing there, fists clenched. Heart pounding, I snapped a few more pictures, then drove straight to a friend of mine, Maria Alvarez, an investigative journalist who owed me a favor from a renovation project last year. She looked through my photos, read the files, and leaned back in her chair. This isn't just a shady HOA, she said. This is land laundering. They're hiding contamination, maybe worse. But if we leak this, we need hard proof. She pointed at the lake photo, the one showing the lights under the surface. Whatever they're covering up is down there. You want revenge. Find out what's in that water. 2 nights later I came prepared. Waders, waterproof light, GoPro strapped to my chest. I slipped into the lake just after midnight. The water was colder than ice, thick with algae and something oily that clung to my skin. About 20 yards from shore, I felt the ground drop away, and then light, a dull blue glow coming from beneath the silt. I brushed it away with my glove and uncovered a glass panel, reinforced like part of a dome. Inside was movement, pipes, cables, a faint hum, and then faces not human. Mannequin-like, maybe, floating figures in suits, eyes closed, hair drifting weightlessly in the dark water. Preservation pods. The feed from my GoPro flickered, then died. I turned, heart hammering, and swam back toward shore. But when I broke the surface, there were flashlights waiting. Kerrigan and 3 others stood by the hatch, rifles slung over their shoulders. "Didn't you hear me, son?" he called out. "Some things stay buried for a reason." He lifted a remote from his pocket and pressed a button. Behind me, the lake began to boil. I barely made it to the tree line before the explosion tore through the water, sending a wave of mud and debris across the shore. The air smelled of burning metal and something chemical. As I collapsed behind my truck, coughing and shaking, one thought burned in my mind. They'd rather destroy everything than let the truth out, and I wasn't done yet. HOA's last meeting, 3 weeks. That's how long it took to become one of them. After the explosion at the lake, I vanished. Changed my phone number, moved to a motel 2 towns over, and used the time to plan. I needed information, and the only way to get it was from the inside. The HOA held monthly board meetings, public, technically in their community hall, a renovated boathouse at the far end of Whispering Pines. I shaved my beard, wore a new jacket, and introduced myself as David Moore, a contractor looking to join the beautification subcommittee. They accepted me instantly. Funny how organizations built on control love new recruits. Inside, the HOA wasn't a council. It was a cult. They used words like purity, protection, and legacy. The members were local landowners, all eerily obedient to Kerrigan. They spoke of phases, containment stability, and something they called the Preservation Project. During my second week, I gained access to the HOA server room, a converted storage closet. That's where I found the real minutes of the board meetings. Not the glossy public notes about lawn maintenance, but files labeled with codes: HLM 03, subject relocation HLM 05, contamination risk assessment, HLM 07, behavioral integrity experiments. Each document had the same logo on the header, not the HOA's, but the echelon development groups, and buried in the fine print, I saw my own parcel number, Lot 12, Holloway Lake Containment Breach Zone. By the 3rd meeting, I'd learned their pattern. They always ended with a toast, cheap champagne, glasses raised to the preservation. Afterward, they'd head downstairs to the archive room, which Kerrigan kept locked. That night, I stayed late, pretending to clean up. When they left, I slipped the stolen M. Dorsey keycard into the reader. The lock clicked. The archive room smelled of dust and oil. Stacks of boxes, filing cabinets, and a single metal shelf filled with hard drives labeled observation footage. I plugged one into the hall's old projector. Static filled the wall. Then a date, April 1978. The footage showed men in lab coats standing beside cylindrical tanks filled with a viscous blue liquid. Inside each tank, something human-shaped but not human. Skin too smooth, eyes too dark. They weren't corpses. They were growing. A voice, monotone and clinical, narrated, "Subject development continues. Genetic drift stable. Neural replication progressing as scheduled. Holloway facility remains secure." Then another clip, 1981. Containment breach. Several subjects escaped into lower reservoir. Area sealed. Water levels increased for concealment. Facility repurposed for civilian oversight under Whispering Pines HOA. The next clip cut abruptly to black. My stomach turned. The HOA wasn't guarding property. They were guarding the experiment. A sudden creak behind me. I turned. Kerrigan stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hall light. He wasn't surprised. If anything, he looked disappointed. "I told you to walk away," he said quietly. "So all this time," I said, "you were keeping them down there?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, eyes tired, almost pleading. "Do you know what happens when human replication projects fail? You get things that think they're people. They imitate, they infiltrate. We couldn't destroy them all, so we built this community to contain them." He pointed at me. "You bought a property sitting right on top of their nest. That's why we were demolishing it," I laughed, a broken, humorless sound. "So I'm supposed to believe you're saving the world by stealing land and killing anyone who asks questions?" Kerrigan sighed. "We're the last line between this lake and what's underneath. But now, because of you, they're waking up again." He lifted a small device, another remote, and the ground beneath us trembled. I looked toward the window, where the lake shimmered under the night sky. Tiny ripples spread outward from the center. Then waves, then shapes rising through the water. I ran for the door, but the hall lights went dark. Kerrigan's voice echoed through the intercom. "You can't stop the HOA, son. It was never about property. It's about preservation." The emergency lights flickered red. From outside came the sound of splintering wood, the dock breaking apart, and something else. Wet footsteps, heavy, many. I grabbed the drive from the projector, stuffed it into my jacket, and bolted through the side exit into the night. From the tree line, I looked back at the hall. Figures were moving through the floodlights, dozens of them crawling out of the lake, pale and silent. Some still looked human, some didn't. The HOA members ran to meet them and didn't resist when the creatures reached out. They embraced. The purchase. The lake shimmered like glass under the afternoon sun as I pulled my truck to a stop at the end of the cracked, weed-riddled driveway. The old Holloway Lake mansion stood before me, its faded white facade looking more ghost than house, windows sealed with wooden planks, vines wrapping around its pillars like desperate fingers. It was beautiful, in that tragic way abandoned things often are. When I'd bought it at the county auction 2 weeks ago, the papers said it was foreclosed, unclaimed, and condemned. But the location, right on the edge of Whispering Pines Lake, was unbeatable. My plan was simple: renovate, flip, and move on. I'd done it dozens of times before, but this one felt different. As I stepped out of the truck, the breeze carried the faint sound of water lapping against the dock, and something else, metal grinding. I followed the noise around the corner, and that's when my stomach dropped. A group of men in orange vests stood on my property. A yellow excavator's claw had already torn through the rear sunroom wall. Dust and shattered wood littered the grass. One man, wearing a navy polo and holding a clipboard, looked at me like I was the intruder. "Can I help you?" he asked flatly. "Yeah, I think you're on my land," I said, pulling the crumpled deed from my jacket pocket. "I just bought this property." The man raised an eyebrow. "Impossible. The HOA condemned this structure last year. It's being cleared for safety reasons." "The HOA?" I repeated, half laughing. "There isn't an HOA anymore. This place has been abandoned for over a decade," he smirked. "Oh, there's an HOA, Whispering Pines Estates Association. I'm the president, Thomas Kerrigan." He motioned to his crew, and the excavator froze mid-swing. "If you actually bought this," Kerrigan said, snatching my paper, "then you'll have to bring it before the board. We'll review your ownership status." "My ownership status?" I said. "I own it." "End of discussion." He ignored me and nodded to the operator. The machine's engine roared back to life. A deep crack echoed as the claw smashed through the roofline. I lunged forward. "Hey, stop!" Kerrigan's hand shot out to block me. "Sir, you're trespassing on an HOA-controlled demolition site." That phrase stuck in my head. HOA-controlled demolition site. What the hell did that even mean? I left before I did something I'd regret. But as I drove off, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The mansion, the dream I'd just purchased, was being ripped apart piece by piece. That night I called the county office. No record of an active HOA, no demolition permits either. When I called back the next morning, I was transferred 3 times before someone finally whispered, "If you bought the Holloway property, get a lawyer. That HOA isn't what it looks like." Click. I returned 2 days later. The site was quiet. The mansion's right wing was gone, replaced by a pile of splintered beams and broken glass. But what really chilled me were the signs. White wooden boards nailed to trees read, "Private area, show property. Trespassers will be reported. All structures subject to removal per Code 9B. None of it made sense. HOA Code 9B? Never heard of it. Then I noticed something else. A black SUV parked down the hill, facing the lake. Engine off. Tinted windows? It hadn't been there before. I walked toward it, and just as I got close, the engine started. It rolled away, without a word. That night I started digging through county records, old HOA documents and newspaper clippings. I learned that Whispering Pines Estates had been dissolved 8 years ago, after a string of accidents. A drowned couple, a missing child, a mysterious house fire, Kerrigan's property apparently, but somehow the HOA had come back. Same name, same president, different mission. I stared at the last line of a 2016 article before my monitor flickered. The Holloway mansion remains vacant. Though rumored to hide secrets, the HOA would rather stay buried. That sentence stayed with me long into the night. The next morning, I returned with my drone to capture evidence of the unauthorized demolition. But as the drone rose above the property, something strange came into view. A grid of foundations behind the mansion. Dozens of them, perfectly aligned squares in the dirt, as if new houses were already being planned there, and in the middle of the site, a large metal hatch, unmarked, rusted, hidden under tarp and debris. I zoomed in. The feed glitched. When it came back, the hatch was open, and someone was standing beside it watching my drone. The secret beneath the lake. The wind off Holloway Lake had teeth that morning. I stood where the mansion's rear wing once stood, boots sinking into mud, still fresh from yesterday's rain. The place looked like a battlefield. Crushed beams, broken glass, a splintered piano lying half-buried in the dirt, and in the middle of it all, that hatch rust had eaten through most of its bolts, but it was still solid industrial, nothing like a typical storm shelter. Someone had tried to hide it, not protect it. A tarp lay nearby, its edges held down by bricks stamped with WPEA, Whispering Pines Estates Association. I knelt, brushed away the mud, and found a small keypad mounted beside the hatch. Numbers were worn smooth. Someone had used it recently. That night I returned with a flashlight and bolt cutters. The neighborhood was silent, except for the crickets and the distant hum of highway lights miles away. Most of the other lake houses were empty. Windows boarded, mailboxes stuffed, yards overgrown. Whispering Pines looked less like an HOA community and more like a forgotten town. The lock gave way with a sharp snap. When I pulled, the hatch groaned open, releasing a breath of air so cold and metallic it burned my throat. The beam of my flashlight revealed a steep staircase disappearing into darkness. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. At the bottom was a corridor, concrete walls, pipes overhead, the faint buzz of electricity. My boots scraped against tile so clean it reflected light. It didn't make sense. Who was maintaining this? I passed a sign bolted to the wall. HOA operations. Authorized personnel only. The absurdity nearly made me laugh. I was underground, trespassing in what looked like a secret facility, and still, the HOA had posted a sign about authorization. The laughter died when I heard voices. I followed the sound until the corridor opened into a room lit by humming fluorescents. Metal tables, file cabinets, a single computer terminal blinked blue in the dark. On the wall, a map. The entire lake neighborhood marked with red pins and coded numbers. Every property had a note beside it. Some were labeled cleared, others pending demolition. My own parcel, Lot 12, was circled in red. Underneath, acquired priority. I pulled open one of the cabinets. Inside were folders filled with aerial photos and inspection sheets dating back decades. But then I saw something odd. A folder labeled Holloway Project, Phase 3. Inside, architectural diagrams of subsurface chambers extending under the lake itself. A network of tunnels. And scribbled in the margin, containment integrity compromised after 2012 collapse. Before I could process what that meant, footsteps echoed down the hall. I killed my light and ducked behind the file cabinet. 2 voices entered. One belonged to Kerrigan. Board wants the rest gone by Friday, he said. Once we drain the lake, we can access the lower vaults, a woman answered. And the new owner. Already handled, Kerrigan said. He'll be served an eviction notice tomorrow. He thinks it's about paperwork. It's better that way. They paused near the map. I could see their silhouettes against the light. Make sure nobody finds the data drives, Kerrigan continued. If word gets out what we buried down there. The door slammed behind them. When the silence returned, I stepped out, heart hammering. I copied what files I could, stuffed them into my backpack, and ran. But when I reached the hatch, it was locked from the outside. I slammed it with my fists, shouted, cursed. Nothing. Then I saw the vent at the far end of the tunnel, narrow but open. I crawled through, scraping my arms and shoulders, until I emerged into the night air beneath the old dock. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the rippling water and trying to make sense of what I'd found. They weren't just demolishing my mansion. They were excavating something. At sunrise, I drove into town, straight to the county archives. The clerk, an older woman with reading glasses, looked up as I dropped the files on her counter. "Ma'am, I need to know what's under Whispering Pines Lake," I said. Her smile faltered. She glanced at the documents, then at me. "You shouldn't have those," she whispered. "Why not?" She hesitated, then pulled a yellowed report from a drawer. "Because that land isn't just residential. It was built on top of the old Holloway research facility. Government project, classified. Shut down in 1978 after a containment failure. The HOA took over the land rights to keep people away." I stared at her. "Containment of what?" Her eyes darted toward the window, then back to me. "You don't want to know? Leave that place, son." But I couldn't. Not anymore. They'd taken my property, my investment. And now, it seemed, the truth itself was buried beneath that lake. That night I parked by the water again, watching as small lights flickered on the far shore, moving like fireflies. Only mechanical, steady, organized. The HOA wasn't demolishing the mansion. They were protecting whatever was underneath, and somehow I had just put myself on their list.